Okay, folks, so we'll jump in right now and say good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to the fourth installation in our Planning Analytics webinar series. This webinar will focus on the migration from TM1 to Planning Analytics, and it's meant to address the challenges and opportunities you'll meet as you plan the migration. First, I'd like to go over a couple of frequently asked questions. Will I be able to get a copy of these slides after the event? And is today's event being recorded for future viewing? The answer to both of those questions is yes. Okay, you'll also have the ability to ask questions during the presentation by simply clicking the Q&A menu located on the bottom right hand of your screen. We encourage questions as this is meant to be an interactive event. Type in your question and hit enter. We'll do our best to answer all of them during the webinar or at the end of the session. I'd like to introduce you to today's presenters. My name is John Prosisto. I'm the Client Success Manager with Revelwood. I have with me Dan Bernatchez, who is our Financial Performance Management Practice Leader and Chief Solution Architect for TM1. Dan has over 25 years experience in the FPM space, specifically working with TM1, and is one of the original founders of Revelwood. Now about our agenda for this webinar. First we'll go over a brief overview of Revelwood. I'll then hand it to Dan for a brief overview of Planning Analytics, and then move into planning your migration and how we can help. We'll finish up with a question and answer session. Feel free to submit your questions. As I said, we'll address as many as we can and make sure to follow up with you individually after the webinar. So quickly about Revelwood. As an IBM Analytics Premier Partner, we cover a broad spectrum of business analytics solutions, but have particular expertise in the Office of Finance, covering all things related to financial planning and reporting. In our 20-year history, we've helped hundreds of Fortune 100 and mid-sized clients incorporate analytics into their everyday thinking, helping them gain a competitive advantage and drive improved outcomes. We've won several IBM and industry awards, and are very proud to have been named the first ever recipient of IBM's Worldwide Customer Analytics Business Partner of the Year at this year's World of Watson conference. With that, I will pass the presentation over to Dan. Dan?
All right, thanks, John. I do want to set up this webinar a little bit differently than previous webinars, or at least enhance the concept of I am looking for people to submit their questions as we're going along this webinar. This is not a demonstration webinar like before. In this particular webinar, we're going to be talking about the migration from your current platform to Planning Analytics. And I'm assuming that each of you have individual requirements and needs of your TM1 application and the infrastructure that is currently supporting it. And you will have individual questions about how do you get from where you are now to a Planning Analytics environment as we're going through the presentation. I'd rather answer those questions that are pertinent to the slides that I'm discussing at that point in time. If I just go through all the slides right now in a presentation mode and no one asks a question, this is not going to be a very long webinar. This is meant to be interactive, and hopefully I can enhance the presentation as much as possible to discuss real-world experiences that you're concerned about. I won't be able to answer every single question that people ask because maybe it's a little too complicated to get into the details, but I'll do as best I can to enhance the presentation based on the real-world questions. All right, so I am looking for an interactive presentation. So, starting off, kind of an overview of what we've done so far with this presentation series. We've talked about Planning Analytics, and we focused on some of the primary differences between Planning Analytics and your current TM1 platform. So we've talked about the workspace environment and the addition of the workspace environment being available as a local on-premise offering. Workspace is the interactive dashboards, the visualization client that's available to you with Planning Analytics, and it's available obviously as part of the cloud offering. It's always been available as part of the Planning Analytics cloud offering. And now with Planning Analytics 2.0, it's available as an on-premise offering as well. In addition to that, we've had a presentation on PAX, PAX being Planning Analytics for Excel. It is the Excel client that allows you to have an Excel client talk to a server in a remote location, like on the cloud. So the end users that use the cloud instance of Planning Analytics, the client end users who need Excel access or Excel type of interaction with your model on the cloud would be using PACS as an add-in to Excel, not TM1 perspectives. And we did an entire review of that, and PACS is available to you, obviously, as a cloud end user tool and also with the Planning Analytics local that is now available. And lastly, we talked about hierarchies, hierarchies being a kind of game-changing type of new feature that's part of the TM1 modeling capability, which is the ability to use attributes as dimensions as on-the-fly virtual dimensions. So if you had a product dimension that had attributes of color, size, style, and you wanted to analyze things by color and size or color and style, it allows you to have a single dimension in your TM1 model, but have it look as if there's 3 or 4 or as many dimensions as you want, and be able to analyze by those attributes of the dimension itself. And the impact of that is that it allows you to design your TM1 models differently to get much greater efficiency and much greater flexibility from your TM1 models. So that's why it's a little bit of a game-changing type of feature. You may want to look back at your current models and see if by applying hierarchies you can actually improve the performance of the model, improve the flexibility of the model, improve the hardware requirements of your overall model. Because by doing this, by applying dimensions based on attributes, you can keep your TM1 models much smaller and much more efficient. And TM1 can actually perform better working with that type of model. And we're still giving the users this great flexibility on analyzing by much more dimensional structure. In addition, hierarchies also allow you to have versioning of your dimensions by having the ability to have multiple hierarchies against a dimension, multiple attribute hierarchies, or I'll call them real hierarchies against your dimension. You can create versions of dimensions. So you can have the org structure as of a particular date. And you can have your primary org structure as part of the base dimension, and you can save off your org structures into other hierarchies, and so you can in essence, date stamp your hierarchies. So hierarchies is a big game changer, and you really should think through where in your models you may want to, where you could take advantage of. And that may impact how you, as part of the migration, it may put in place a project that you want to do to take advantage of hierarchies to make your overall system more efficient. So what are we talking about? Well, I think I've shown this slide in every one of the presentations. It just talks about, where TM1 is and how they've gotten from TM1 Cloud to Planning Analytics to now Planning Analytics 2.0. And now that Planning Analytics 2.0 is also available locally or as an on-premise environment, the purpose of this presentation is to talk about where you are, which is more than likely you're sitting here with a on-premise TM1 environment, either 10.1 or 10.2. Hopefully we don't have any 9.5.2 users out there anymore, but you're probably sitting there with a 10.1 or 10.2 environment, sitting in your local, using your local hardware, and you're looking to either move to the cloud. So maybe you want to go from where you are now, and there's an internal initiative to move to the cloud. So how do I get from where I am now to a move to Planning Analytics on cloud? Or maybe you want to keep it locally, but you want to move to Planning Analytics locally. And take advantage of it, take advantage of the feature set of Planning Analytics 2.0. And maybe you want to do it locally with an eventual plan to move to the cloud. So any one of these paths that you're looking to take, you need to plan for, because the Planning Analytics move is not a standard upgrade, in my opinion, and we're going to go over those, some of those concepts during the presentation itself. So let's say your plan is to move directly to the cloud, right? So you want to go from where you are now and you want to move to the cloud. There's either you want to remove the need for keeping the hardware in-house, dealing with your own upgrades. Maybe there's maybe there's just an internal initiative to move these types of systems off to cloud environments. Maybe that's a mandate inside of your company. So what do you get when you move to the cloud? So when you say you're going to go to the cloud, the biggest benefit from it is that you no longer need to manage your TM1 server. You no longer need to manage any of the installations other than the installation of your Excel add-in to your end users, because that is something that has to happen on their desktops. But IBM handles everything else. You get into a licensing agreement with IBM. They will procure your environment. They'll install TM1, they'll configure it, they'll hook up Planning Analytics Workspace so that it's communicating with that environment. They'll set up your TM1 web server for you. The initial environment, the kind of out-of-the-box environment, if you will, is I think a 64 gig server with around 250 gigs of storage space for files. So you can get a fairly large TM1 model up there. Off their kind of base pricing. If you have additional needs, if you have a much larger system that requires more memory or more power, you can obviously, for more money, you can get a much broader environment with IBM. But the base one that when they're quoting pricing, is a 64 gig server. So the biggest benefit you get is the fact that IBM is kind of managing all that. So once you go this route, you no longer need to deal with upgrading your TM1 environment or upgrading your Planning Analytics Workspace environment. That's all handled by IBM itself. In addition to that, I will answer the question that just came up in a second. In addition to that, when you go this route, IBM offers bridge to cloud offerings, because there is a difference in working with the cloud, right? Your server now is sitting on a machine on the cloud. How do you manage it? How do you get data there, and so on? The only environment that's available to the end users in Excel when you're on the cloud is the PACS environment. So if you need to do a lot of conversion of your current TM1 perspectives reports to PACS reports and make sure they all work, you may need time to do that. You may need to test out the environment. So IBM does offer a bridge to cloud offer. And what it does is it allows you to get your cloud environment up and running, right? So procure the environment with IBM, and you can keep your on-premise environment working while you test everything on the cloud and you migrate things to the cloud until you are ready to move to the cloud. So it's a bridge from where you are now to your cloud, to working on the cloud. So there's time involved there. As hopefully you know, when you move to the cloud, you're changing your plan. Right now, if you have an on-premise TM1 environment, you're paying annual maintenance on it. As you move to the cloud, you're changing from an annual maintenance licensing model to a subscription model, right? So you pay for usage with the subscription model. The TM1, the Planning Analytics on the cloud being kind of software as a service. Now, when you move to the cloud, there is the biggest difference there's two big differences in my opinion. One is when you move to the cloud, how do you get the data from your on-premise source systems to TM1, right, to your TM1 model? Where right now today, maybe you have a TM1 server that directly ODBC connects to your ERP system or to some sort of staging relational database. The big change is that for your Planning Analytics server on the cloud to talk to your source systems or to get data from your source systems, that's going to change in some manner. One way that you could change is the cloud offers secure FTP, so you could extract from your ERP system, send a file via secure FTP up to the cloud, and then have your TI processes load that data from a directory that's local to the TM1 server itself. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is set up what they call secure gateway, which basically allows your your Planning Analytics server on the cloud to connect to your source systems via ODBC, but it passes through a secure gateway to make sure your data is secure as it's passing from your on-premise environment to your Planning Analytics on the cloud environment. Also, there is another product available to you called Cognos Command Center, which allows you to kind of manage the processing from your source systems and the movement of data to the cloud and kind of kick off your TI processes and manage it in a different way. So it's kind of a product that allows you to trigger your TI processes through a different interface and manage the processing from different environments. So it can kind of kick off an ODBC process to extract the information, take the file, put it up on the cloud for you, and kick off your TI process, and it kind of manages all of that communication. So you can use Cognos Command Center to facilitate that. So that's probably the biggest change. So if you have, depending on your environment and what you're looking at, this is definitely an area you want to consider if you're moving to the cloud. These are things that you need to look into. The other big difference is when you're on the cloud, the end user interfaces that are available to you. So these are for your end users. So the interfaces that are available to you are TM1 Web, right? Because you have a TM1 Web server up there. You go to the URL for TM1 Web and you interact with it. Workspace, right? That's obviously available to you on the cloud. And then you have PACS. The thing that's not listed in that final bullet is TM1 Perspectives. TM1 Perspectives does not work well over a wide area network type of connection or a slow connection. So Perspectives can't connect to a Planning Analytics server on the cloud. So if you are heavily Perspectives based, you need to make sure, and your users are heavy in Excel with Perspectives, then you're going to need to convert those things to PACS before the end users will be able to use them as a cloud offering. So that's probably the biggest thing that I think people are looking at, saying, okay, as I move from my current environment to Planning Analytics, how do I get over that hurdle? The bridge to cloud is if your eventual idea is to move directly to the cloud, this bridge to cloud offering is what gives you the timing to do all of that conversion and all of that testing. I want to pause for a second just to answer some of the questions that kind of came up here. One question was, when is the end of life for Perspectives? I do not know the answer to that. I do not currently, as far as I know, IBM hasn't set an end of life yet for Perspectives. I believe with the 10.3 or Planning Analytics 2.0, let me say Planning Analytics 2.0, I believe, and I will try to verify this, that at a minimum, the current Perspectives is valid through at least the end of 2018 from a support standpoint. I think that would follow standard IBM support standpoints. Whether they are going to continue to keep Perspectives in Planning Analytics 2.0 and how long they will do that for, I do not have a full answer from IBM yet. But I will try to get you an idea of their current release, what is the end of life of what the products were for the current release. So we will send that out as a reply to this webinar. The Revelwood product plans working with the cloud, I believe that would be referring to Dynamo and the products that we have. The product plans for the plans for Revelwood for Dynamo is that Dynamo will not be converted to Planning Analytics for Excel. So if you are a Dynamo client, please contact us. We do have a tool which will document all of your Dynamo setups of your reports and come up with what it would take to basically the active forms equivalent of the Dynamo setup that you have to make it a little bit easier for you to convert your Dynamo reports to active forms. And then once you convert to active forms, PACS supports active forms, and you can use those active forms in as Excel PACS add-ins, or of course TM1 Web supports active forms as well. The best way to keep things in sync between on-premise and cloud until the full switchover, the best way to do that from a TM1 data standpoint is you can just migrate your TM1 database between the two environments. If you're building out the hierarchies concept of TM1, if you're looking to take advantage of that as part of this build out, we can work with you on how to make sure that you don't blow away your hierarchy development, which would obviously would be only cloud-based with your current on-premise environment. But that's relatively easy to do the way the hierarchies are stored within the Planning Analytics environment. But you're basically just moving data from your on-premise environment up to the cloud, and we just have to come up with a schedule to keep things in sync. From a Q&A experience with Command Center and integration service. I don't know if I understand that last one. Tips on managing user access rights in the cloud. User access rights, I'm not sure what you're saying in that sense. When you move to Planning Analytics on the cloud, you will be required to use an IBM ID for that. So you'll be set up with an IBM ID. So typically that would be your email address, your internal email address. So in my case, it would be dbernatches@revelwood.com would be my IBM ID. As you log in to the cloud offering, that is what gets set up as part of the client for the cloud. And then the setup and maintenance of TM1 security to that environment is the same as it would be on premise. You're basically maintaining the same, cube security, dimension security, process security, element security that you would normally do. You can make your IBM ID be validated against your on-premise Active Directory or so on. There's a SAML concept to that, so they can validate that you are a valid user within your organization between the cloud and your on-premise environment to make sure that you follow those security procedures. Somebody's asking, does single sign-on work on the cloud? No. On the cloud, again, you have to use an IBM ID to do that, so you will be confronted to put in your IBM ID and the password to be able to get into the cloud itself. Can we use AWS for this? I believe the question is, can you basically install Planning Analytics on an Amazon server rather than using IBM? I'm assuming that's the question there. Yes, you could. We actually have done that internally at Revelwood when we were testing Planning Analytics local rather than do something in our offices and then we wanted all of our consultants to be able to access it. So we did install Planning Analytics on an AWS server. It does get a little bit tricky, and I'll talk about that. Not tricky, but there's some complexities in that, and I will talk about that on the next slide, which is more of a Planning Analytics local question than it is a Planning Analytics cloud question. So hopefully this gives you an idea of when you move to the cloud, some of the issues that will come up. When will we be required? One of the questions is, when will you be required to move from 10.2.2 to Planning Analytics? I will try to get that question answered from IBM as well, and we'll send it out as an answer to this webinar. All right, moving on. What if you wanted to move to IPA Local? Okay, well in this case, now you need to get set up your infrastructure to support it. There's a big difference between this upgrade and other upgrades, and the biggest difference is the fact that there is another server you need and you must have to get a Planning Analytics local installed. So your TM1 server environment, I'll say basically that's an upgrade. So you would upgrade let's say you have a dev server, you would upgrade that TM1 dev server to the new Planning Analytics instance, which is basically just an upgrade to the server itself. You also, if you're using the TM1 web environment, there's an upgrade to the TM1 web environment. If that's a separate server to you, that server would have to go through a kind of a standard upgrade. You also need to have another server available to support Workspace. And that install is a bit different. It uses what's called Docker, which is a virtual machine. And the complexity of this is that Docker being its own virtual machine, I'm assuming many of you, when you have your TM1 servers and your TM1 web servers set up now, they're currently virtualized machines already, right? So you have a virtual machine running your TM1 server, and you have a virtual machine running your TM1 web server, and so on. Well, since Docker itself, which is what Workspaces is kind of embedded inside, if you will, is its own virtual machine. You can't run a virtual machine inside of a virtual machine. I shouldn't say you can't. There are ways of doing it, but it's very complicated, and there are a lot of reasons why it may not work. So you really have to do this as its own standalone non-virtualized Windows environment or as a Linux environment. So it does, you'd have to sit down and talk to your IT group to talk about what are the complexities of setting up a Docker environment inside of your current infrastructure. So that would be a little bit of a different experience. Once you get past that, though, once you get past that concept, then it's just a TM1 server and TM1 web server, and you have this other thing which supports Workspace. When you do IPA Local, we had our webinar in December talking about Workspace. For end users in your local environment to use the Workspace environment as a visualization tool or as a dashboarding tool or whatever, that is an additional license cost. So if you did an IPA Local upgrade and you just kept the licensing you have today, you would get the latest and greatest server, you get the advantages of hierarchies in your TM1 environment, you get the improved TM1 web interface, you would get PACS and the Excel add-in for Planning Analytics for Excel, but you wouldn't get the ability to use Workspace as an end-user environment unless you pay an additional licensing fee. Just so that's clear. Hopefully it was clear in December when I had the original webinar, and hopefully it's clear now. The big benefit, if you will, for people who are concerned about migrating is that Perspectives in this install is available to you, right? So now you have both your old Perspectives environment and you have PACS available to you as well. So it gives you the ability to perform this upgrade, you get up and running, and you can convert people over, and you can test out the PACS environment, and you can migrate over to PACS as your end user tool inside of Excel. And you still have Perspectives available to you. The big negative, if you will, is that Perspectives does not understand hierarchies. So if you are looking to move to hierarchies, the only place you're going to be able to visualize those hierarchies is in the PACS, PACS and Workspace environments. And on the web, if you use the PACS components on the web as well. But you cannot visualize hierarchies in Perspectives. The other big benefit of staying local, obviously, is it doesn't really change your access to on-premise data, right? So that additional task goes away. You have a kind of a standard TM1 server that would be able to access your on-premise data in the same way that you do today. The other benefit of moving to PACS is if you have a heavy Citrix environment, the good thing is that PACS doesn't need Citrix. Most people have a Citrix environment today because if they installed Perspectives locally, they wouldn't be able to, and then somebody's trying to come in from another country or from across the country, the performance would not work as well. So PACS does not require that. So you could have somebody sitting in Europe and connecting to a TM1 server sitting in New York, and the performance actually is quite good. I've actually done it quite a lot. I'm just seeing if there's any questions that came in here. One of the comments was that it's much easier on a Linux VM. Yes, setting up the Docker on a Linux VM is much, much simpler. That I totally agree. Is Workspace required if you continue to use Perspectives? If all you do is you use Perspectives, that's a good question. So you need the Workspace or the Docker install if you're going to use PACS because it uses the same element selecting mechanism, subset editor, if you will, that Workspace uses. It uses the same one. And I'm pretty sure that, I'm trying to think this through, I'm going to get this finally answered, but I'm pretty sure the TM1 web component requires it as well. I need to verify that. But if you want to use anything associated with hierarchies, if you want to use anything associated with Workspace, if you want to use anything associated with PACS, you have to use the, you absolutely need the Docker installation. If you don't do any of that, you only use TM1 Perspectives itself, not necessary. If you use TM1 Web, that's the one I have to verify on whether that would require the workspace Docker environment. The question, the workspace is required to use PAX even if you're not actually using workspace? Yes, because PAX borrows from the workspace subset element selecting mechanism. It's actually using the same code as the workspace environment. In essence, you really point your PAX environment to the workspace Docker environment. You don't point it to the TM1 server. So yes, it is required. Are there any enhancements or changes to TM1 REST API? I think the REST API is in constant enhancement mode. There are several enhancements on access to, I think, some of the security features and functionalities of TM1, but I'm not an expert in what all the releases are in the REST API just yet. I'll see if I can get some information for that to reply to that question. What is Workspace? Let me say, can you please just, if you look at our previous webinar that we did on the workspace environment, which is on our website, which I'll have the link to it at the end of this presentation. Maybe if you could look at that presentation. Also, there are several YouTube videos on Planning Analytics Workspace that you may want to look at to see, that may give you an idea of what it is. It's basically an additional client environment where you can connect to TM1 data and you can visualize it. And it's much more visually pleasing interface, if you will, where you can create dashboards against your TM1 model. But it is one of the additional environments that the clients can have available to them to work with your TM1 environment, your TM1 data set. Okay, so this is an on-premise kind of look. Disregard the bottom one. I borrowed this from an IBM slide, but this is where you are going to, if you look at the lower left, that is your TM1 version 2 data tier server, right? That's your TM1 server. So that's what you currently have available, set up on-premise. To the right of that, in the same pink box, is your TM1 v2 web server. Some people run their TM1 web server on the same machine that they're running their TM1 server on, depending on how many users and concurrent users you have. Some people have them as separate environments. And if you look at, so actually I should remember the slide. If you look at, yes, your web server is interacting with your top, the one that's on top there is your Docker server. That's where Workspace is. And that's kind of the suggested environments for the web server, from cores and memory for a number of concurrent named users that you have that are using Workspace. So, and it can be a Windows environment, or it can be a Linux environment, but it's not a virtualized environment as far as that goes, because you're running Docker itself as its own virtualized environment. Disregard the CAM authentication. That's up to you. That's dependent upon your individual environments on whether you use CAM authentication. But there's basically 3 servers. There's a TM1 server, there's a TM1 web server, and then there's this Docker environment to support the Workspace dedicated server. Okay, so you're looking to migrate. What do you need to do? Well, you need to understand your current environment, because it's all dependent upon your environment, on how complicated it's going to be to get from where you are now to be able to take advantage of all these great new features, right? So how do end users interact with TM1 in your environment? Are they TM1 web primarily? Are they Perspectives? When they come in from Perspectives, do they buy a Citrix? All of this is going to impact the amount of Perspectives reports that need to be converted, or maybe end user training that needs to happen, and so on. So you need to understand what your environment is and plan out where you want to get to based on the feature set of Planning Analytics. Again, you can streamline your environment now, right? You can actually get rid of a lot of roadblocks potentially in your environment. And you have to kind of plan for this. Review your TM1 model itself. I've described what hierarchies are. So if you look at your T1 model right now, are there things you'd want to take advantage of from hierarchies, right? Hey, I get this model. People are always complaining that they can't do X, Y, and Z to analyze their data. Would hierarchies help? Or I got this model, and I'm constantly having to save off all these PDF reports of what the financials look like as of a particular day. Would versioning of my account dimension and versioning of my organization org chart dimension benefit me? Plan for the use of hierarchies. So understand what benefit you're going to get out of this, right? Do you currently have a base TM1 cube with an analytical cube tied to it that allows you to do more dimensionality analysis right now? That was kind of the old way we've handled these attribute-based dimensions, right? That's the old design concept of TM1, is to have a base input cube and then an analytics cube that's either rule-based or TI-based to give you the ability to do more analysis cross-dimensionally. Well, can that all be basically taken away and removed? All that overhead can be removed from your environment with the use of hierarchies. That'd be a great reason to migrate to planning analytics. Are people in your company asking for dashboards, right? And we all can create charts and so on in Excel and maybe publish them via TM1 Web, but a true dashboard and interactive charting that Workspace gives you the ability to change a value, have it update the charts, be able to drill into the components of a chart directly, all that capability that's available to you in Workspace. That's true dashboard visualization, interactive dashboards that people are really looking for when they say the word dashboard. So if that's been a requirement or maybe an area you've been looking to go into, Workspaces, the Workspace environment should be able to provide that for you, and you can kind of plan to migrate to that. Have you ever wanted to use TM1's metrics cubes or strategy maps? Well, Workspace visualizes those types of cubes and makes it much more interactive, and it allows you to visualize strategy maps. And if you don't know what a metrics cube is, what a strategy map is, please contact us. I'd love to talk to you about it. It's a way of enhancing your TM1 environment and enhancing the capabilities of really analyzing your data. The other thing that comes with the cloud is you get access to Watson Analytics. And for those of you who haven't played around with Watson Analytics, it's its own separate environment. It's a cloud-based environment that allows you to put data there, not just your TM1 data, though you can pump your TM1 data in there, and there's actually automated ways of doing that, especially with the cloud offering. But allows you to take data out of your environment. It could be invoicing data, it could be operational data in some manner, put it into Watson Analytics. And Watson Analytics allows you to visualize the relationship between fields of data in a way that TM1 never did for you, because it's going to do the work for you and show you what things correlate to others. Is the color of the car influencing the buying patterns of a particular type of vehicle in the in the Northeast, right? It looks at your data, it looks for those correlations of data, and it allows you to also build storybooks of your data. So you can have a storybook of how at the end of a month, you create a storybook of your financials, and it's much more visual and visually pleasing to see these charts that actually interrelate to each other and walk somebody through a storybook of how we are comparing to last year, how we're comparing, who are my top 10 customers, what are my top 5 products, and so on and so forth, and what is the relationship, what's the biggest things that are influencing the relationship between, to get to gross profit. And Watson Analytics is its own capability. You can go out there today, get a Watson Analytics license and play with it on your own, or you can upgrade to Planning Analytics and you get access to Watson Analytics with that license. The only question that came up out of this was metrics cubes. Does that still require Performance Modeler? It only requires Performance Modeler to create the cube itself. Performance Modeler is required to create a metrics indicator dimension and a metrics dimension, and then to physically create the metrics cube so that it automatically generates the rules that are embedded in the metrics cube. But once you do that step, you do not need Performance Modeler to interact with it and so on. In fact, the best place to visualize the metrics cube really is the Workspace environment, because it gives you a lot of capabilities there. But you do need Performance Modeler to do that initial step of creating the metrics cube itself. Is Architect available on the cloud? Yes, Architect is available on the cloud. One of the things you get with the cloud is you get an ability So the people who are the modelers of the environment, right, which is usually a small group of people, and you get a modeler, a separate license with that, you are allowed to RDP into a Windows environment on the cloud. And when you RDP into that environment, you basically have perspectives and architect available to you there to do your development. So you can build out your dimensions, you can build out your rules, you can build out your TI processes using that environment. But that's really only for the model licenses. But yes, the architect environment is available to you on the cloud with that license. So you have to decide how many of those licenses you want, because they are separately priced. Okay, moving along. So here's an example of a move. Sorry, I'm going to pause for a second. Another question came on. Workspace user roles. Yeah, there are three roles, right? There's modelers, there's analysts, there's administrators. I guess you also have contributors. But from a workspace standpoint, the environment, the user roles of workspace allow you to do certain things in the workspace environment. If you are a modeler in the workspace environment, that's what allows you to create workbooks and so on. It also gives you the ability to create hierarchies, and you are the modeler. So the only place to actually create one of these new versions of a hierarchy is in the modeler interface. So a modeler user role there gives you the ability to create hierarchies. An analyst and a contributor role within Workspace is what allows you to either be a developer of a workbook, or you're just somebody who consumes a previously created Workspace workbook. So yes, there are user roles within a Workspace environment as well. So if you're looking to build out the Workspace environment, you'd have to understand those. Again, hopefully we can help you with that. So this is a very quick example of, hey, my current TM1 environment is mostly users coming in via TM1 web to interact with the budgeting and whatever planning and reporting environment. You have a small group of TM1 financial analysts who use perspectives, and they maintain a kind of a core set of standard reports. Well, this upgrade is relatively simple, right, if you think about it, because TM1 Web is still available to you in Planning Workspace, right? So the web model is going to work, right? The web model, if you upgrade to the latest version of TM1 Web, it will work. It has a slightly different look to it. I'll say a slightly different veneer to it, if you will. But it's all the same functionality as you had before with, I'll say plus some, because it's able to consume some of the PAX style reports. The quick reports, the web is able to interact with what's called a PAX quick report now. But it works. It's actually I shouldn't say much faster. Some reports are going to be much faster in the latest version of TM1 Web, but it performs quite well. It handles a lot more conditional formatting capabilities. Its visualizations of charts and so on is a bit better than the previous version of TM1 Web, but that will just work once you upgrade. And your conversion to PAX in this particular example would be limited, right? You have a core set of standard reports that people use, and you would just convert those to PAX, test them. PAX is able to publish to TM1 Web, and your conversion should be relatively simple in this type of environment, right? So what is your environment? You have to look at it and decide, is yours going to be a complex conversion or not? As I said, this one here, to me, would be relatively simple. The next one, we've been using TM1 for years. You have a large user community from all over the world. You do have a web environment, but it's only used for certain things. There's a lot of TM1 perspectives, ad hoc reports that were built, users coming in via Citrix. I know of one client, over the years that says, they have potentially up to 500 reports that people have developed. Well, this one here is going to be a bit more complicated to convert, right? It's going to be one of those, you're going to need the time you want to basically either upgrade them locally and have them have the ability to be in perspectives and work with the TM1 Web environment, TM1 Server environment, and have to have the time to convert people over to the PAX environment and to convert your reports over to the PAX environment to make sure all of that's working for you. Now, realize PAX will read a TM1 perspectives report. So it's not like you have to recreate everything from absolute scratch, right? Are you going to run into 0 bugs I'm going to say no. I'm sure there's something that PACS will falter on because there's too many different style reports that are out there. But we've done a fair amount of loading perspectives reports in PACS, and the conversions are I'll say pretty good to really good. One of the biggest thing is when you if you use a lot of action buttons in your reports, the conversion from the old style action buttons of perspectives to the new style action buttons of PACS, that is its own separate conversion process because that is kind of handled quite differently. I'll say the PACS is handling it properly and the old perspectives didn't handle it properly. So it's not like you're basically starting from scratch in PACS. It's just you have to test your report. You want to bring it up in PACS, make sure it's working properly, make sure it's performing well, and convert over time if you have this type of environment. But realize you're not recreating every single report that you ever had. PACS will read these reports and give you, at a minimum, a really good starting point to tweak to get it to work properly, or you're going to bring it up, it's going to work properly, and you just save it as a PACS report and you go off on your merry way. So it's not like you're starting from scratch. Are architect perspectives still required in planning analytics? If so, for what? What can't be done natively in Workspace itself? Architect and the architect and or Server Explorer environments or perspectives is still required. Well, I shouldn't say that. That or performance modeler is required. Workspace is not the model creation environment yet. They're looking to make a model creation environment inside of Workspace, but if you're going to create a dimension or create a TI process or create a rule or create a cube for that matter, you will need either the architect or Server Explorer environments or perspectives or the performance modeler environment available to you to build out, to create the TM1 model itself. So that's what that's required for. Workspace, primarily Workspace is a data visualization, a data contribution tool, like TM1 Web, if you will. But there's also, there is a beginning point of it being a model development environment for dimension. You can do some dimension building in it, and you can also maintain the hierarchies concept in Workspace. But you still do need a development environment, and that is either architect / perspectives or performance modeler. Does PACS use DBR functions to pull data or DBS to send data? Both of those are available to you. PACS has multiple ways of getting the data into the Excel environment. The old DBR or DBRW functions are supported. The DBS functions are also supported. But PACS also has a concept called quick reports, which uses a different mechanism. It basically uses an MDX expression to bring data in a grid format back without using DBR formulas. It fills in the cross sections of your elements for you without requiring a DBR formula there. So that's another way to bring data in to PACS from TM1. So the answer to your question is yes, it does support that. It also supports the active forms functions to create active forms within PACS, and it has other capabilities as well. All right, so what can we do to help you? And what we've come up with is basically a 3-step program, because I think this entire thing of moving to planning analytics is going to be a long-term endeavor for a lot of our clients and a lot of the TM1 community. So we basically came up with a 3-step plan for you. The first step, come up with for your particular environment. Let's come up with what is the impact. I got a blank slide here. What is the impact of planning analytics in your environment? So what we want to do is we want to have kind of a one-on-one conversation with you. And what we're offering is a free half-hour conversation with you. You want to ask questions that's specific to your environment, what you're going through, the size of your user community, what your environment looks like, and so on. Then we want to give you a half hour that we will be on the phone with you, talk about your particular environment, talk about what your plans are, what your timing is, and so on, and allow you to hopefully give you a little more insight specific to you and your environment. So we're looking to have some slots available every week to answer questions for clients that are out there that are serious about moving to planning analytics, and put that initial idea in place, and figure out what your stumbling blocks are, or we know where you may need assistance, or kind of give you ideas of the things you're going to need to consider as your particular environment wants to move. John, can you see the slides? Because I just lost connection. Okay.
Dan, this is Kelly. We can see the slides. Do you want us to drive them for you?
Yeah, tell me which slide we're on, because I cannot see the slide right now.
We're on roadmap.
Roadmap. Okay, so I just talked about, and I apologize because all of a sudden my slide, I couldn't see my slides anymore. So we talked about the impact plan. So that's going to be where we want to offer to any TM1 clients out there that's serious about moving to Planning Analytics, a phone call to discuss your particular needs. Then we want to talk about more of a roadmap. This is where we go in, and we want to work with you to really put a true project plan in place of how you want to migrate, right? So you want to migrate to the cloud, or you want to do something, you want to migrate locally. Well, each of those things is going to require you to put a project plan in place, right? And you want to lay out what your steps are. Do you want to go directly to the cloud? Okay, so you need to work with IBM. You need to get your licensing in place. You need to set up a bridge to cloud type of environment. You need to procure the environment with IBM. You're going to need to, I'm assuming, you're going to need some assistance on setting up that environment and doing that initial move. You need to make the decisions on how that cloud environment is going to talk to your local servers. What's the best approach for you to do that? Is that going to be command center? Is that going to be using FTP? Is that going to be using secure gateway? And you need to put a plan in place, maybe design changes in place as far as using hierarchies, not using hierarchies, and analyzing your environment and whether you want to take advantage of workspace. And what are your phases going to be? What's the initial migration phase to get up and running in Planning Analytics, and what's the next phase of taking advantage of Planning Analytics new feature set? So putting something in place that, putting a true project plan in place. So that may be a sit down for a day, sit down for 2 days in a large scale environment, and really putting getting to the meat of the matter and put timings and tasks and milestones in place of how you're going to get from where you are to be up and running and taking full advantage of the Planning Analytics environment. Next slide, which I believe is impact.
Implementation or implement.
Implementation,
yep.
Yeah, implementation. And then just like we've done for many of you who are on the phone for your upgrade itself, we are here to help you with your upgrade, to actually perform the upgrade itself, to get the environments installed, help you with the initial testing, help you with the conversion from perspectives to packs, help you with the training. That'd be training of the admins on the use of hierarchies and so on, setting up your TI processes to build out the hierarchies, or then testing those out using the packs and or workspace environment and so on, and just being using our consulting services to help you actually perform the upgrade. We've done this for many of you before. As I said, I do believe this upgrade is a bit more involved because it's more multi-stage. There's the upgrade itself, and then there's the taking advantage of the new environment. And with the new, with the addition of the PACS environment, there obviously would be training involved as well for your end users once you get down the road of actually using PACS. And we're here to help in any way over the course of that. Next slide. And somebody tell me what's on the next slide. I apologize.
So this next slide is the links to our Planning Analytics webinar series. So if you did not attend the previous ones, These are the links, as Dan mentioned, Planning Analytics Workspace, Planning Analytics for Excel, and Introduction to Planning Analytics Hierarchies. So the recordings are all at those links. And then we're wrapping up. Here's John's contact information. And Dan and John, if you have any last comments, I'd say here's what we can add to it.
And do you want to jump in here, John, to talk about the contacts for next steps and so on?
I think actually we might have an audio problem with John. So
okay.
Our next steps are that, I'll go ahead, Dan, if you don't mind. Our next steps are that when we end the webinar, you're going to be offered a questionnaire. It's a short 4 or 5 questions just to help us better understand your needs for migrating to Planning Analytics. One of the questions is about possible future webinars and upcoming topics. So if you have some pressing questions and you really want us to cover a topic around migration, this is your opportunity to say, hey, please, I'd love for you guys to cover this aspect of migrating. We will be sending out, as John mentioned earlier on the call, we'll be sending out the slide deck and a recording of the slides, as well as a link to the questionnaire. That should go out probably the end of the week, possibly Monday if things end up, little glitches here or there, but probably the end of the week. And then if you're ready to schedule your free impact plan call, just give John a phone call or give him an email at jpersisto@revelwood.com, and we can get you scheduled with the team. Dan, any final comments?
No, just that I apologize for the some of the issues I had, but hopefully everyone got a lot out of this webinar series. It was fun for me to do. I will answer the remaining questions and reply back to everyone who attended. And good luck with your path to Planning Analytics.